Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Sharon Oyella, and today we're crocheting this cute little doll. She doesn't take very long to make, and this is a full video tutorial, so I'm going to walk you through every single row of this pattern. This video is going to be given to you in two parts. So part one, we're going to be making the base part of the pattern, so that's the head and the body. At the same time, I'm also going to show you how to do the hair cap. And then in part two, which is linked at the end of this video, I will show you how to do the rest of the doll. So make the arms, sew everything together and give her a face, and also how to do her hair. To make one doll, I used 3 different colors and also a small amount for the belt. So a cream color for the skin, a dress color. The hair is done in 2 steps, so I make a hair cap and then I also add hair on top of that. So you want a color for that as well. And then I use black for the eyes, but if you want to have safety eyes, then those here are a 6mm safety eye. But don't worry if you don't have any. I think the yarn eyes look pretty fantastic. Alright, so with the weight of yarn, I used a Red Heart Super Saver. Now if you've seen my videos before, I'm normally using a Red Heart Comfort yarn, which gives a thicker result, so I get a bigger doll. I chose this yarn here because I wanted a smaller doll. So I wanted to keep her on the small side. If you're in the UK, I think that the closest to this would still be an Aran. I'm not too sure about that. I think a double knit yarn would be quite a bit thinner than this still. So all that would happen if all you have to work with is double knit is you'd get a smaller doll. So with that yarn, I'm using a 4mm hook, but I crochet on the tight side so I can get away with it. If you're crochet more on the loose side, you might want to switch down to a smaller hook. So I'll let you decide. With that, I'm also using a blunt end yarn needle for sewing, a pair of scissors, of course, and we also need some stuffing. You don't need very much. Choose a nice, soft, springy polyester stuffing. You want to be able to sew through it without getting any clumps. And of course, with all my patterns here on YouTube, there's also a written pattern that's free that's going to be printed off on my blog. That link is popping up on your screen. Once you get to the written pattern, you'll scroll all the way down to the bottom and look for the green print friendly button. You have to be viewing from a computer to see that green print friendly button. Alright guys, we're about to get started. One note before we do. This is a full video tutorial, so I'm going to show you each and every row of the pattern. So I tend to go a little bit more quickly. If I went super slow, then this would be a 10-hour video, and nobody wants a 10-hour video. So I'm relying on you to watch what I'm doing and then pause the video, try it yourself, and then hit play again when you're ready to carry on. You can rewind anything you need to see again and fast forward over any parts that you don't need to see. So that's the great thing about video learning, you can use it at your own speed. So the first 7 rows of the head and the 7 rows of the hair cap are actually identical. So if you do need help making the hair cap, then you can refer back to this part of the tutorial and it will walk you through all 7 rows of making the hair cap. So we're going to start first with the head, of course. So row number 1 for the top of the head and for the hair cap is a magic ring with 7 single crochet stitches. I'm going to show you my favorite way of getting this ring. If this method does not work for you and you find it frustrating, I do have another tutorial and it's popping up here on your screen, and that will show you the same ring but getting it a different way. So watch this way first, and if it doesn't work for you, don't worry. Head over to the second tutorial and I'll show you an alternative way of getting this ring. So I'm going to take the shorter yarn tail. This is also called the starting yarn tail, and this is the working yarn here. So I'm going to take the shorter yarn tail, I'm going to wrap it around these 2 fingers twice, pulling it over my hand. Wrap around twice, once, twice. Now I'm going to take the shorter yarn tail, or the starting yarn tail, and hold it between my pinky and my thumb. And now the working yarn, the one attached to my yarn ball, in between my pinky and my thumb. We're making a slip knot. I'm going to insert my hook into those 2 strings. I'm going to go to the back, and I'm going to grab this yarn right here, and I'm going to pull it underneath these 2 strings. Pull it under. Now I have a loop on my hook. I'm going to grab that yarn one more time and pull it through the loop on my hook. And that's created our slip knot. Now we can take it off of our fingers and get ready to crochet on. Now I'm going to put 7 single crochets into this ring. I'm going to go through the ring, grab this yarn and pull it through the ring. Now I have 2 loops on my hook. Grab the yarn and pull it through the 2 loops. There is my first single crochet. Now I need to repeat that 6 more times, going through the ring, grab the yarn and pull it through the ring. I have 2 loops, yarn over and pull it through those 2 loops. And there's my second single crochet, repeating again, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and there's number 7. I put 7 single crochets into that ring. Now they're called stitches. If I turn it to the side, you can see there's 2 loops in each stitch going down. They look like V's, and there should be 7 of those. Now we need to close up the ring, but before we do that, I'm going to reach in here, I'm going to grab that starting yarn tail and pull it out from in between those strings so it doesn't get tangled up. Now I'm going to hold onto that slip knot that I made with my finger and my thumb, and I'm going to pull on one of these 2 strings and see which one closes up the ring. I'm going to pull up from my finger and my thumb. It's not that one, so I know it's the next one. Pulling up until the ring is closed. Now I need to get rid of this ring here, so I'm going to pull on the starting yarn tail. There's row 1 of my head and my hair cap, and that should have 7 stitches in it. If you pull it the last one so you don't lose it and just leave it hanging. Underneath this big loop is the first stitch to count, and it's the V like I told you. And there should be 7 of these going around, and the last one is in front of the starting yarn tail. Each stitch has 2 loops in it. When you go through, make sure you're going through both loops of that stitch each time, and you just go right underneath those 2 strings of the V. Each time you go through a stitch, you should be going right underneath those 2 strings. So that's where our first single crochet is going to go. We're going to get ready to crochet on here. You can add a marker if you want, or just follow along with me. We're going to put 2 single crochets in each one of those 7 stitches, and going through, making sure we go through both loops of the stitch, push our hook through, grab the yarn and pull it through. Now we have 2 loops, yarn over and pull through. And there was the first single crochet. Now going back in the same stitch that we were just in, and do it again. And there was 2. Going into the second stitch and putting 2 single crochets. Going into the third stitch, 2 single crochets. And into the fourth, into the fifth, into the sixth stitch, 2 single crochets, now we're in the last stitch of the row, number 7, 2 single crochets. And we're finished row 2, and now we have 14 stitches around. So you should have 14 stitches around of the head and also of the hair cap. Row 2 should have 14 stitches. Hopping in with an edit because I forgot to mention about the starting yarn tail. Depending on the magic ring method that you chose, you might have a starting yarn tail hanging here. You don't want to cut this up short. You can leave it hanging and tuck it into the head when you're all done, or you can crochet around it. So in the next row, when you go through your stitch, just pick up the starting yarn tail and hold it over your hook, and then crochet around it. And you can crochet for the entire row around this, or just a few stitches, and then you would cut it free. So I got about 4 stitches over top of this starting yarn tail, and if I want it out of my way right now, I can just cut it free. This is where I add a marker, and I just use a piece of yarn of a different color for a stitch marker. If you use the same thing as me, just be aware that yarn can get pulled out along the way and you can lose your spot. There's all sorts of stitch markers out there. You don't need to use yarn. So I'm just going to go through that last stitch I just put in, just push my hook through, lay my piece of yarn over top, and then pull one strand through, And so I'll have a strand hanging on either side, and I'm going to move this marker at the end of every row. So we just marked off the last stitch of row 2. So we have 14 stitches around. Row 3 is 1 single crochet in the first, and then 2 single crochets into the second stitch, and then we're going to repeat that 1 2 1 2 all the way around. When you land on this marker, you should be putting in 2 single crochets. So I'm going to do the first couple sets with you. 1 single crochet in the first stitch, and now 2 single crochets into the second. Now we're going to repeat that, 1 single crochet in the first, and then 2 single crochets into the second. And by first and second, I just mean first stitch after the hook. 1 single crochet, and now 2 single crochets into that second stitch. And if you're following this part of the tutorial for the hair cap, you should be doing the same thing for this row. Now you're just going to repeat that, 1 2 1 2. When you land on this marker, you should be putting in 2 single crochets. So I'm going to speed up the row to the end, 1 single crochet, and then 2 into the second. So just coming to the end of the row, I'm ready to put my last set in, 1 single crochet in the next stitch, and now 2 single crochets into the second. It's going to land on that marker, so I'll pull it out and put in 2 single crochets. So taking a look at the written pattern, if you're doing the head, we just finished row 3 and we have 21 stitches around. Rows 4 through 8 is 1 single crochet in each one of those 21 stitches for 5 rows. If you're doing the hair cap, we just finished row 3 and we have 21 stitches around. Rows 4 through 7 is 1 single crochet in each one of those 21 stitches for 4 rows. So the only difference is a row between them. You can keep a little notepad beside you and start off this row by putting in a single crochet in each one of those 21 stitches. When you land on this marker, put a notch on your notepad. When you have 5 notches, then hit play again on the video and we'll meet back here. If you're doing the hair cap, of course, you're only doing 4 rows of single crochet. So I forgot to mention, if your piece starts folding up on itself, like if it starts to look like this, you'll be working inside out. So just make sure that you take a moment to turn it right side, push where that starting yarn tail is coming out of, inward. This is the right side, and that's the side you should always be working on. So if it looks funny to you, you're probably working inside out. Alright guys, welcome back. You should be finished row 8 of the head, and if you're doing the hair cap, you should be finished row 7. So I just put the last stitch in for row 7, and now it says to slip stitch the next stitch and finish off. Slip stitching just means go through the next stitch like you normally would, grab the yarn and pull it through. Instead of yarning over, just pull the first loop through the second loop. And there was our slip stitch. And then you cut free and leave a length for sewing. So you can see here I got about a 1.5 foot of yarn there. Now I'm going to pull that yarn through this loop, get it down to about there, and then pull tight. So the hair cap is done and it has a tail for sewing, and I'm going to set that aside until I'm ready to start doing the hair. So just like the written pattern tells you, this is where you're going to start installing the safety eyes if you're using them, and if you don't use them, don't worry. I'm going to show you how to do yarn eyes at the very end. So there's safety eyes and there's yarn eyes. I actually like the yarn eyes a little bit better than the safety eyes, but it's up to you what you want to use. So we're going to pull out the last stitch we just put in so we don't lose it, and that last stitch that we just put in is going to be the center of the back of the head. So we're going to turn it around and we're going to work on this side, so the opposite side of that last stitch. And here's where we're going to install our safety eyes, and they go in between the 6th and 7th row, and counting the rows, we just count the rings. So we start up here, 1 2 3 4 5 6 and 7. So the first eye goes in between the 6th and 7th, and then I want 3 visible stitch holes between them. You just count the stitch holes, 1 2 3. So on the other side of that one, and there we go. So depending on where you got your safety eyes, some of them have metal backs, some of them have plastic backs. Depending on which ones yours comes with, just follow the instructions that were given to you. You would install the backs now, and then we'd continue on with the rest of the pattern. Like I said, I'm going to be installing yarn eyes when we're all done, so I don't need to put these in. And when we're all done the doll, when it's all closed up, I'm going to show you how to add those eyes and also a nose. Alright, now we're going to continue on. We're going to add our marker. Before we carry on, let's count the rows. In case you lost track, you should be at the end of row 8, and we count the rows by discounting the rings. Always count behind your marker, and we start down here. This is row 1. This is the loop that we started off with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Carrying on with row 9, this is where we decrease the round and we're making the neck area. So for this round, we're going to put a single crochet in the first stitch, and then the remaining stitches, we're going to be crocheting 2 stitches together all the way around. So when you land it on the marker, you should be crocheting 2 stitches together. So 1 single crochet in the first, and now crochet 2 stitches together. Leave that loop on your hook and go into the next stitch. Now you have 3 loops, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And that was crocheting 2 stitches together. You've turned 2 stitches into 1. We can do it again. Go through, leave that loop on your hook and go into the next stitch. You have 3 loops, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Because we're decreasing so quickly, one after the other, 2 together, one after the other, you might start to see gaps in your work. So if you do, the way to eliminate that is use the invisible decrease. And by doing that, we're going to work in the front loops only. That's the loop closest to you. So go through the next front loop. Don't yarn over. Instead, go into the next front loop. And that's what it looks like. Yarn over, pull through the first 2. Now you have 2 loops again. Yarn over and pull through those last 2. And that was the invisible decrease. So it takes a little bit longer than the first method I showed you. So you can go through both loops if you want. You have 3 loops and pull through. If you start to see gaps, then use the invisible decrease. Go through the first front loop. Don't yarn over. Go through the next front loop. Grab the yarn, pull it through the first 2. Grab the yarn and pull it through the last 2. So I'll leave which method you want to use up to you. I prefer the single crochet 2 together. It's so much quicker, and I don't ever see gaps in my work, and a lot of you won't see gaps, but some of you will, and you're not doing anything wrong. It's just, it has to do with tension and practice. I think the more you crochet and the tighter your tension gets, or the more even, then you won't have to worry so much about using the invisible decrease. So the last 2, you can see is going to land on that marker, so I'll pull it out and crochet 2 together. There's the end of row 9, and now we have 11 stitches around. I'm going to move the marker. And I'm now switching colors in this row, so I've just brought in my color change. I'm just going to lay it there so it's waiting for me when I'm ready. We are going to be switching colors in the 10th stitch of this row. So row number 10 is 1 single crochet in the next 9 stitches. 1 single crochet in the next 9. I'm going to speed up the camera. I made it to my 9th stitch. We're going to switch colors in the 10th, and then we're going to slip stitch that last stitch. So go through the next stitch like you normally would and pull the yarn through. Leave those loops on your hook and hold it back here under your finger. Bring in the color change and hold it under the same finger. Get ready to crochet on with the new color and switch fingers. Pull the new color through those 2 loops. Before you let go of those yarn tails in the back, slip stitch the next stitch. I'm just going to pull up my marker. I'm going to go through the next stitch like I normally would, pull the yarn through. Instead of yarning over, just pull the first loop through the second loop. Now you can let go of those yarn tails, cut free from the skin color, and now we're ready to crochet on with the new color. Row 11 is 2 single crochets in each one of those 11 stitches. We still have 11 stitches around. That slip stitch we just did counts as a stitch. So 2 single crochets in each one of those 11 stitches. That was 2, 2 into the next, and you want to do this 11 times. I'm going to speed up the camera. At the end of row 11, and there should be 22 stitches around, and you might want to stop and do a stitch count and make sure you have 22 stitches. Remember that one stitch to count is underneath this big loop, and there should be 22 of these V's all the way around, and the last one to count is right here. It might look a little bit smaller in this row because of the way we slip stitch and stuff in the previous row. So there's the 22nd stitch right here. You can see it looks quite a bit smaller than the other ones. I'm going to add a marker, but before I do that, I'm just going to knot these two color change yarn tails together. And then I'm going to cut them up shorter and just leave them in there. Now I'm going to add a marker. In rows 12 to 15 is one single crochet in each one of those 22 stitches for 4 rows. So I'm going to leave you on your own. Remember, when you land on the marker, you should be putting in a single crochet, and you should move this marker 4 times. So you can pause the video now, and we'll meet back here at the end of row 15. One single crochet in each one of those 22 stitches for 4 rows. I'll finish row 15. Row 16 is one single crochet in the next 9 stitches, and then 2 single crochets into the next 2 stitches, and repeat, one single crochet in the next 9, and then 2 single crochets into the last 2 stitches. So one single crochet in the next 9. I'm going to speed it up. And now 2 single crochets into the next 2 stitches. There's 1, back in, and there's 2, and now 2 single crochets into the next stitch. And now we're going to repeat that last sequence. One single crochet in the next 9, and then 2 single crochets into the next 2 stitches. And that completes row 16, and now we have 26 stitches around. I'm going to move that marker. Row 17 is the last row of the body, and we're going to be working in the front loops only. Remember when I said the stitch has 2 loops? The front loop is the one closest to you. And that's the front loop is the one we're going to be working in for this entire row. One single crochet in each one of those 26 front loops. When you land on the marker, you should be putting a single crochet into the front loop. And there's the last stitch of row 17. Now we're going to slip stitch the next loop, the next front loop, and finish off. So go through, grab the yarn, pull it through. Instead of yarning over, just pull the first loop through the second. Now we can finish off. We don't need a tail for sewing, so you don't need a long tail. We're just going to weave this one in. So pull it through that loop, get it down to about here, and then pull tight. I just want to get rid of this yarn tail so it's out of our way. You can't cut it up to the knot, otherwise it will eventually work itself free. So I'm just going to carry it up through the middle of a stitch, bring it through, going to straighten it out a little bit, and that's going to be the back, so I don't see that little jump here in the front. You can see I made sure when I put her hair on and her eyes that that part where we just slip stitch is in the back. I did straighten mine out, but it's here somewhere. There it is. And I don't want to see that in the front of the doll. So this one, I'm just going to carry it up here anywhere. You could weave it through a row, or since it's the same color as the dress, I am going to just knot it off up here. So I just brought it through, and before pulling it all the way through, I'm going to go through that loop and then pull tight. And now that yarn tail will never come free from there. So I'm just going to carry it through inside and then cut it up shorter. Now we're ready to close up the body, and it's just going to look just like this There's no feet or anything, and the doll stands up really nicely on her own. So let's do that. When we did our last row of crocheting in the front loops only, we created this little ridge of loops, and those are the loops that we're going to be working in. So just roll back the last row and expose those loops inside, and there should be 26 loops. Where you started and ended the row, there's going to be a little bit of a jump inside, so when you're crocheting around, just pay attention to that. I'm going to show you how to jump across here. It's very easy once you get to the end. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to pull the yarn through. And we're not going to worry about stitch counts or anything like that. We're just worrying about closing up the body. So we pulled the yarn through. I'm going to hang on to that in the back. I'm going to chain one so it doesn't pull through. So I'm going to do one sequence throughout every row. It's going to be one single crochet and then crochet two together, one single crochet and crochet two together, all the way down until I have about 9 stitches left. So let's do this together. One single crochet in that first loop, and now crochet 2 loops together. And here you don't have to worry about gaps or anything, so you don't have to worry about an invisible decrease because you're not going to really see under here anyway. This is the bottom of the doll, so it doesn't really matter. So there was 2 together, and I'm going to repeat that. One single crochet, and now 2 together. One single crochet, and 2 together. I've made it all the way around. I'm just coming to the end, and you can see there's a little bit of a weird looking jump there. So I'm just going to look here for the next loop, and it's down here. Almost missed it. It's right down there. One single crochet, and now 2 together. And because we're not worried about stitch counts or anything, this is pretty easy. We don't have to worry about anything. We just want to continue the sequence until we have about 9 stitches left. But we're going to also stop and stuff the body before that hole gets too small. So there, I've made it around in all the loops, and now I'm going to work in both loops again. So now I'm working in stitches. One single crochet, and then 2 together. And the hole's getting smaller and smaller. Before it gets too small, we're going to stop and put some stuffing in there. So I think right about here, I'm going to stop, pull up my last stitch so I don't lose it, and I can stuff some more after I get a couple more stitches in as well. Just want the majority in. Now I'm going to continue on, and I just did a stitch count. I have 13 stitches, so I need to repeat that sequence 4 more times. I'm going to get this down to 9 stitches. So one single crochet in the next, and then 2 together. That was once. Twice. 3 times, and then one more time should do it. 1, and then 2 together. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And don't worry if you have 10 or 8 stitches. As long as you have around 9, it's good enough. We just want to get the hole small enough where we can close it up by sewing. So I'm going to pull that yarn tail through that loop, get it down to about there, pull tight. Okay, now I'm going to get this ready for sewing. I'm going to stuff more in there, but first I'm going to weave in and out of the remaining stitches with my yarn needle. Just go in and out, weaving around, back to where I started. I can now pull on that and close the gap, but before I do that, I'm going to put more stuffing in as needed. And this doesn't need too much more. I just want to fill in any holes I feel inside there. Okay, and that feels about right. Looks good. So now I can pull on this yarn tail to close that gap. And I can knot off to hold that gap closed. So I'll just go through a stitch close by. Before pulling it all the way through, go through that loop and pull tight. Now you want the doll to stand up nicely on its own. If you've overstuffed it at all and it's bulging out at the bottom, just bring your yarn needle through and come up anywhere near the top and slightly pull on it and pull it in. That's only if it's bulging out. You don't have to worry about this if it's not. Now I'm going to knot off up here to hold that closed. And there we go. And I'm not sure if that knotted off, so I'm just going to do it one more time. There. Now I'm going to bring the yarn out anywhere else away from that area, pull on it slightly, and cut. Alright my friends, that brings us to the end of part 1. In part 2 we'll do the arms. We'll make the arms and then sew them to the body, and then we'll also finish the hair part and get that sewn onto the head and add the eyes and the nose and all that other great stuff. So to see part 2 and continue on making this doll, you can go ahead and hit that link that's popping up on your screen, and I'll meet you over there.